This Eid al-Adha, and it's holiday indeed around the country and yes, around the world, looking at some of those issues that are necessary for us to have. Our youth perspective this morning is around issues of the finance bill, and to help us out in that conversation are folks who are versed in a number of issues, but we see it necessary to have constant conversations around some of these issues. Joining us in the hot seats of the Situation Room this morning, just as a reminder that your live streams are up on Facebook and on X and on YouTube, and our audience on KTN Karibu Sana. Conrad Kerr is a fiscal policy analyst and Stella Swake is an economic analyst, and they join us this morning and we look at the finance bill and we look at some of those things and we're saying, okay, have an understanding from any perspective, but as we do on Friday, let's have an understanding from the youth perspective. Karibuni sana, both of you.
Thank you.
Welcome to the hot seats of the Situation Room. We get into things this morning in the way that we normally do. We have a proverb that we visit. We have a different African country that we visit every week. This week we visit one, and a proverb from that country every day. We would like to hear your interpretation of that proverb that Dennis is going to share.
So today we are in a country that is within another country. First of all, in South Africa.
Okay.
The country is called Eswatini, Swaziland, a very famous country. Conrad, I'll just ask you, what do you know about Eswatini?
I think it is one of the smallest countries in Africa.
I have to congratulate you, the first man this week who did not talk about the reed dance. Talk about size of geography.
I was supposed to.
You were going to go there.
It is actually known for having a very interesting dance.
Yeah. And Stella, it is also a country whose healthcare system is struggling. So when you talk about struggling healthcare in Kenya, it is also happening in there, because you look at a country whose budget allocation towards healthcare in the country is wanting, and with other stats fact that 1 in 4 people has HIV in the country, one would hope that perhaps maybe the government would invest in that. But that aside, they equally have you can go and see Eswatini lions. They also have lions and rhinos. If you can't go to Nairobi National Park, Eswatini is a place to go. But the proverb of the day: a bee that is forced into the hive will not produce honey. A bee that is forced into the hive will not produce any honey. Stella, ladies first. What do you make of that?
I just remembered when you're home and then your mom tells you're washing dishes, and then your mom tells you, can you please wash those dishes?
You are about to anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
So like you feel like, no, I can't do it because you're telling me to do it. So what I get from the proverb is, when you're forcing people to do something and they're not doing it by will, then it becomes more difficult. They do it as a routine or to tick the box if you're scary enough. But if you're not scary, you're a sweet, gentle person, then they won't do it, because what will you do at the end of the day?
Utadu.
Yes.
Conrad, what do you make of it?
Of course, that is a very interesting proverb, and I will just say that means to me that if you actually force something out of someone, then they might not be able to do it. And it makes me also relate it with another proverb from where I come from, that it is a stupid fly that follows the corpse to the grave.
Because it will just be buried with it.
Exactly. Yeah.
See? Ndu. Well
true.
Put, no?
Very, very well put. Your opinion is always right, as we say. I always, as we have this conversation, I always like to give, the backdrop that when we saw 2024, one would have imagined that 2024 was the first time there was ever a finance bill in Kenya, but that's not the truth.
Yeah.
That there's a finance bill every year, that there is a budget. That the finance bill essentially gives life to the budget, because it is in the finance bill that you will then see the different areas that, number one, the government will then get its taxes, and then number two, things that they will introduce in terms of now taxes and levies, essentially what Caesar will then be able to collect to run the country. It is not a new phenomenon. Yes. It happens every year. So long as there's a budget, there's a finance bill. Yes. And for some reason, in 2024, it took the world, and I say the world intentionally because it took the world by storm. And then we saw anti-finance bill protests, which led to I want to say deliberately shelving of that finance bill, because we've seen that somehow some of the tenets of it came back. But then what it did do is that it gave birth to a new era where people were going to be very concerned about anything that happened moving forward. Right? So people wanted to know, people wanted to be informed, people wanted to be active and participate moving forward. So come September, when the budgetary process started, people started to ask questions. Okay, what's happening? And by the time we get to March, April, and the finance bill suggestions would come through, how are we going to be involved in this? And people are always looking for a breakdown of what the finance bill means or what it entails. And so here we are, where some people have been arrested, those issues are in court. But here we are on this table today and saying, okay, for the youth perspective for Friday, let's look at it in terms of what it exactly means. And we'll start off with you, Conrad, in terms of what we are seeing that could potentially help or hurt when it comes to the budget for the country.
Thank you so much, Ndu, for having me. And this is a very timely conversation, even as because I think the budget is the estimates will be presented by the CS, and we also need to look at where did we come from in terms of the finance bill, and how did the people start looking at the finance bill as a very integral document when it comes to budget. And in this country we have 48 finance bills every year, every financial year. One that comes from the national government and 47 that comes from the county governments that align with their budgets. But why did we focus more on the finance bill? Because I think the people discovered that while the budget was one of the most integral documents, very important documents, but how do you fund that budget? That is how people started knowing that the finance bill really affects their lives. But we also need not to ignore the fact that a budget document is a very, very integral document, because if you have a punitive budget document, you'll have a punitive finance bill. And if you get the budget right, you'll have the right finance bill. So while we actually focus on the finance bill, we do not need to underscore the fact that having a good budget estimates are very key in terms of having a very good finance bill. And the reason why we've had issues with the finance bill is because every year we are having a budget that does not actually represent our physical capacity as a country.
What exactly do you mean when we have a budget that does not represent our physical capacity? Just expound on that a little bit, yeah.
From where I sit, I think we have a very ambitious budget in terms of a budget that we cannot fund. Because when you have a budget that you cannot fund with your money, with the money you can get yourself, this really means that you have to go out to get some more money from someone else to fund your budget. And that is the problem. Because once you even in your own house, once you cannot pay, you stay in a house, you cannot pay rent, that you have to borrow money every month to actually sustain that lifestyle. I think they will call you a social misfit because at the end of the day you cannot sustain your life.
Stella, it is a budget that he says we cannot afford, and one would say if it's common knowledge, then why do it? Is it by design, or is it that they just don't care?
I'd look at it from a perspective of what the budget goes into. So we have 4 divisions. There's recurrent budget, there's debt servicing, there's equitable share, and there's what's the other one? Development expenditure. So for right now, the largest share goes to debt servicing and recurrent expenditure. Debt servicing is a fast charge under the PFMA Act, the PFM Act, that is the Public Finance Management Act. So there's no way you will pay recurrent expenditure before paying your debts. And not paying debts means we are going to default. Defaulting comes with another whole issues that we maybe need another session to discuss. But recurrent expenditure is another thing. We keep saying that more of our money goes to a small percentage of the people in the country, considering that we have 19 million people who are in the labor population, only 3 million are in the formal sector, and 1 million are employed by the government, the civil servants. So the 1 million take the bigger share of the expenditure to give us services. So I look at it from a point where we say we want to reduce recurrent expenditure, and I see people saying that we need to fire people. So my thoughts always go to, when we say fire people, we are not going to fire MPs. We are not going to fire chairmen and board CEOs.
And directors. And
exactly. We go to the common mwananchi. So we are looking at mass firing of people for us to achieve a good percentage of budget cuts in the recurrent expenditure. Is that what we want? I don't think so. Number two, we say that we need money for healthcare. Education is not getting enough allocation of money. We've seen your gazette today. Education is no longer free. But then we say the budget is large or the budget is ambitious. And I ask myself, what do we want? Do we want a bigger budget or do we want more allocation? But then I'm cognizant of the misappropriation and the lack of priorities that we have, and even the leakages of this budget. So I will use the same example I used yesterday. When you look at the allocations that go into transportation and fuel allowance, you see an amount of around 15 billion every fiscal year. The amount that we need for invigilation and examination is 9 billion. So where are our priorities? And I ask the question, where is the value for money? The largest budget for transport and fuel goes to domestic transport. And then I keep asking myself, where do our politicians go domestically? Because when you look at it logically, me going to a foreign country should be more expensive than me going to Naivasha. But where does it become so expensive to travel domestically and we don't see the value of this money? When I want to see my MP, I can't see him because I don't even know where he lives. Or he lives in Nairobi while I live in Narok, where is my place where I come from. When we want to see them, when we want to talk to them, they're not available for us, but they say they're traveling to their constituents. So where is the value for money? We need to put our priorities right, in my view, and we need to look at this budget clause by clause. We can't be saying as a people or as Kenyans, we need the budget reduced. These are the people who are using the money. So MPs won't go and say, reduce our allocation for our salaries or for our allowances. When you look at the finance bill, the allowances, the per diems per day, the amount that was being taxed has been increased from 2,000, not being taxed, the one that is not taxed.
Not taxed.
From 2,000 to 10,000. And someone said, this does not affect me in the informal sector or me in another private company. It affects civil servants who get the per diems and the allowances. So at the end of the day, it has looked at them and not as at me as the common wananchi. So those are the things that we are seeing with the budget that, and I agree, no government has the best interest of its constituents. They just want to get all they can from us in whatever way, legal or illegal, and it just depends on how you react as a people. And if you let them, they will do it.
That's a sad statement.
So this is the thing that we seem to be. I think about a hamster in a cage on a wheel. It's not going anywhere. But it's providing some kind of temporary entertainment for itself. So it just keeps going round and round and round and round and round. At some point, it's going to get tired. It's going to maybe look for something to forage with. Then it's going to get back on the wheel, and it's going to keep. And I see that that's what's happening currently. That, as you've mentioned, Stella, that there's a lot in terms of debt. It's the first charge on any revenue that comes in. The first charge is debt. And there's very little left then for these other three things that you talk about.
Yeah.
There's very little that's then left towards equitable share that goes to all parts of the country.
Yeah.
There's recurrent expenditure, salaries and whatnot that needs to be paid. And then there's development. And we keep talking about a developing country. The only way to get you from developing to economically developed is the development.
Yes,
you have to actually do the thing to get you from this place to the next. But we're still a hamster on the wheel, isn't it?
Yes.
That there's so much debt, and within the same fiscal year, we still keep accruing this debt, still keep getting into this debt, reducing the margin for development, recurrent, and equitable share. We keep reducing the margin of what's available. How can we possibly be progressive from a fiscal point of view? How can you? From where I sit, it is impossible. You cannot do it. You cannot do it. Something somewhere has to stop. And how do we do that? We talk about the wastage in government. Political economists had a conversation with us just the other day, and he said it's very easy just from the books, just from looking at the books, to save easily 40 million shillings, 40 million just from looking, before you actually go to each place and say, okay, what can we mop up? You can save 40 million just from here, before we talk about going to Naivasha and, Lamu, whatever.
Yeah.
So how can he actually do it from a fiscal point of view to say, okay, guys, stop the bleed? It really can be done, but what needs to happen?
I think you've really made a very serious statement that I think it is and passionately really brought up this issue. And from where I sit, this is possible. And I agree it is possible to actually reduce the waste. It is possible. And this really needs us to make very difficult decisions as a country. One, we must just stop unnecessary expenditure, including the travels. There is a time, I think, in the neighboring country when former President Magufuli actually said, you are not going to travel outside this country. Nobody's going anywhere. We are here. We are going to face this and face it because I think we need to face it because so that we can get out of this mess. And one of the things that need to happen is we need to look at our current expenditure, because that is what is taking our biggest chunk of money. What can we stop doing? Can we stop the travels in the country? She has just alluded to the fact that it is very expensive to actually maintain travels within locally, domestically. So can we just stop that? Even MPs, when they are coming to Nairobi to actually maybe legislate and coming from other areas, can we have, because I think they receive mileage as a compensation for those who come outside Nairobi to Parliament.
Yes, they do.
Can we also just make a different decision? We are paying you 1 million shillings. Can you be able to sustain yourself in that? I don't think they pay you to come here every day. They pay you a salary. But they don't also put on board another allowance for coming and sitting here. Because they already paid you your money. They already paid you an allowance, a travel allowance. Why should we give you mileage now for servicing your vehicle? And that really should also apply to even to the directors, even in the ministries, to the parastatals, to the PSs. And I mean, we also need to make a very difficult decision of cutting wages and salaries for some of these big guys. Because if you're paying more than 290 people 1 million plus, that is a lot of money, plus the women reps, plus the MCAs, plus everyone, and you're paying them more than 100,000. When we have other Kenyans who are actually earning less than 15,000, and they have to actually survive in the same economy. It does not make sense. So we really need to make these difficult decisions of we must cut the wages, the salaries, the allowances, so that we can have money for development. Because every day we shall complain, we have very little money for development, for roads and for maintenance and for doing all sorts of development. But we are not ready to relinquish some of the allowances we get, by the way.
We're not ready to relinquish some of the allowances. Plus, there is a statement you've said, no government has good good interest for its people. They want the best for themselves at all costs, whether in a legal or illegal way. They don't care about the people. Yet, the government is for the people by the people, right? Everyone else who's in these offices enjoys what we call delegated power. We've mentioned about wastage that we see every day. After an election, budget proposals, the Finance Act is in place. But what do we see? Campaigns on top of vehicles day in, day out. That is serviced by the Wanjiku. But that notwithstanding, there is the other glaring aspect of corruption that keeps on glaring at us day in, day out. The cabinet secretary says 2 billion is being stolen every day. Instead of investing these out there, just to bring it home.
The president, the former president is the one who said it.
So here we have the cabinet secretary who says, "Hii pesa mnaweka huko nje, tafadhali woye, just bring it here so that it can help the economy grow." So in terms of dealing with the problem that is corruption and ensuring that the agencies, the offices that are there to ensure that as much as we're struggling to finance this budget, that we equally deal with the problem that is corruption. Just how important and integral is that in ensuring that you're able to live within our means?
That statement was very, let me say humiliating. Because when you say that, then it means you know where the money goes, you know who takes it, you know where it comes from. So, I don't know, that was not a nice statement, but then we're here. So, we see every day the Auditor General, the Control of Budget, they always say, and we see these documents, they tell us this money was used for this, we bought a laptop, we bought an umbrella at 100,000, we bought a pen at 8,000 shillings. We see all of these things. So my problem has always been our parliament, to be honest, because the Controller of Budget and the Auditor General do not have the power to prosecute or convict anyone. They report. That is their job. They've done it very well, honestly. But then the people that are supposed to be checking accountability, because to be honest, the parliament is the number one accountability check of our country. And then there is us as the common wananchi. But then they represent us. So, as I said yesterday, we have every document that goes into this country passed through parliament. The parliament always approves every document, whether they read it or not. They're the ones who approve the documents. They're the ones who approve the budget. They're the ones who approve the line items. They discuss the finance bill clause by clause. They're the ones who approve it. So if we wanted a solution, we would have found it. But then the problem comes when the problem benefits this particular set of people. Because corruption does not benefit us. It benefits the ones who get it. I don't want to say the MPs, but basically it's them. So, but then I ask myself, we keep blaming and saying that our politicians are this and that, but when you go to the grassroots or to the common mwananchi, even we have a problem. Because I ask myself, when I go to Huduma Center or when I go to a parastatal, who is asking me for a handout? When I go to a place that I'm supposed to use my ID and I find a soldier at the gate and I want to go in, they tell me, niongeleshe vizuri. I am not talking to a politician. I am talking to a guard. So
somebody who has a job, like you, for example.
Exactly. So then I see this problem as the problem of integrity as a societal problem, such that we have commercialized each and everything in this country. When I want a service from you, you want me to pay you, yet you're getting paid for that. And that, again, leads me to what Conrad has said about MPs being given allowance. We are paying you, and then we are giving you an allowance to do the job that we are paying you to do. It does not make any sense. And I don't know why this has continued for such a long time, given that when you're saying a country is struggling, why is it struggling on one end? And sometimes I tell myself, I think the only people that have a problem and are scared for this country is the citizens. No one else. Because the things we see our politicians and our leaders do are so different from what we think should be going on for a country that they say we do not have money. So we do not have money, but you guys are living lavishly, and then you're reporting things and even saying in parliament there's a lot of corruption, yet we have given you the powers to actually curb and try and make this problem go away. Every day we say we have tumetenga hii, tumefanya hii for corruption and to try and bring these issues, but we don't see anything. No one is being convicted. And those that are being convicted, it becomes something of a political witch hunt, and it's not something that is supposed to be helping the country.
Indeed.
Yeah.
We're looking around at the finance bill, and this is our youth perspective conversation this Friday morning in the Situation Room. And we're asking ourselves the questions coming off of the protests, obviously, which rocked the country and, yes, did rock the world, when, it still made reference to till today. And the questions abound as per, okay, so how involved will people be? Especially coming off the place where oftentimes we were not involved in these conversations. We waited for those who do the work of crunching the numbers to come and tell us and say, well, this is how much we are going to spend this year. This is where we're going to get the money from, quote unquote. And then they finish and then they come and tell us, oh, this is how we did or did not spend the money. And everybody says, we hem and we haw, we complain a little bit, but then we're not involved in the process. So that's why it's important for these conversations to happen, because then we start to say, at the very least, know what is happening. And then you can ask informed questions, and then you can then make informed decisions about what you will do when they say come and vote. At the very least, let it be that.
Yeah.
If you're going to be involved in citizen activism and things like that, then a little bit more, sure. But the issue of budgeted corruption hits us in the face every time, because then we want to ask the question, how is it that you are going to build 0.9 kilometers of a road? And according to the budget, it is going to cost you 840 million shillings. Okay? Budget. 840. We finish the same 0.9 kilometers of a road. The road has not increased in length. It's still in the same place.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
It has not increased. But for some reason, we look at the books, and this road now cost 8.4 billion. It's not a movie. Happened in this country.
Yeah.
So then we want to ask the question, was that the plan all along? When we say that the budget for education is 634 billion shillings, and then somewhere there along the line, we can't find money to send to schools in the middle of the term, and then over 10 years, we're owing 60 billion. Was it designed from the very beginning to look this way? And we're asking these questions in order to inform ourselves of the realities of what happens. It's not just a budget in a briefcase spoken about on the stairs of Harambe House. It is a lot more than that. Yeah. So when we ask ourselves the questions about being informed and involved, this is where it comes. What do you do about budgeted corruption, Stella?
I'm a firm believer that budgeted corruption comes to be when things are prolonged. Because when you take a lot of time to build, for example, a road, you tend to repeat things, and maybe by design, and probably the prolonging of these things is usually by design, just for the corruption to take place. And someone said that we don't have, our leaders don't give us solutions. And they don't do things to a good, they don't do quality projects so that they are repeated and they get money from that. Yes. Yeah. So now, what do we do about budgeted corruption? Then I always vouch for institutions, empowering of the institutions that are supposed to be curbing and that are supposed to be controlling and convicting and all of these things. So I look at the budget for FY 2025-2026, and I look at the budget that has been allocated for EACC. I know, again, this is a hot topic because EACC has been called a toothless dog and all of that, all those shenanigans. But one of the problems that makes it possible to control and to humiliate or manipulate an institution is by not allocating them enough budget, because then they do not have the ability and the resources to move around, the resources to actually do their job. So I look at all the departments and ministries that have been allocated, for example, travel and fuel allowance, and I didn't see any for EACC.
No, but Stella, surely, you think about it. I am giving you money to check me. Why would I give you all the money that you need to check me if I was doing something nefarious on the side? Why would I do that?
Exactly my point. So I remember someone proposed, I think the judiciary, that their budget should be tagged to the up to a percentage in the constitution. So the constitution is a good book for us, and if we get a government that actually adheres to the constitution, it's a good book. It was meant to protect the citizens from the politicians and not the other way around, because I think the people who made it knew that they knew themselves that what we can do is beyond this world. So if we could have such an arrangement such that the budget for these independent institutions is a percentage of the budget, such that it's not a discussion that we are saying this year, let's give EACC 4 billion, let's give ODPP, let's give the Auditor General or the Controller of Budget this amount, then it would be a good thing. Number two, there needs to be a way that we do not have a cyclical or something that ties the EACC to ODPP. Like EACC cannot have a decision, a conclusive decision. We have to depend on ODPP, yet we have this evidence that incriminates you and shows you that this is what you did, this is the corruption that you engaged in. Such that, because I don't see the independence, if EACC has to depend on ODPP, and we know whoever appointed this, the director of this it does not make sense. There's a lot of mining and a lot of manipulation if it's one person. So there needs to be a way where we give the independence is seen. We say independent, and it's independent, not independent by books, and we cannot really see that.
You know, I hear the discussion around budgeted corruption, because you remember there's a time we had a discussion around the construction of the airport and then Adani, but we even went back to the previous construction that started their holes there, but there's someone who was actually paid, because apparently there's a contract that didn't go in place and that person had to be paid. It is a case for many cases in the country, because even the French deal for the Mau Summit Road, and we know how much we had to pay because apparently we did not stick to the contract that was in place in the agreement. And you look at what the Auditor General and Controller of Budget are saying. You look at what EACC is doing, but rightfully, as you say, where is the independence? If I have to depend, on the other person to clear my cases that I have investigated, I have the evidence, but I have to deliver this to someone else to charge that in court and bring justice to Kenyans. But that aside, there is the question of independence that you've talked about, and the need for Kenyans to rise up and speak. And why do I say that? Because while Kenyans have donated their power to the National Assembly, who are the number one oversight bodies as given powers by the people, has failed. How then do the people reclaim their power and say, if you will not do that, if EACC will not do that, if the ODPP, the entire justice system will not do that, Kenyans through public participation shall rise and speak their minds and demand that right is done? How critical is that aspect when it comes to matters to do with the finance bill?
The public participation is actually not a privilege. It is a right enshrined in the Constitution. And before I respond to that, I want to respond to the other aspect about budget corruption. And most of the time, we want to look at the bigger projects. That is when we see budget corruption. But let me just give you context. When I want to buy this microphone, the government wants to buy this microphone. Of course, there are procurement regulations that are supposed to happen so that now it is advertised and all that, and then it is procured. How does budgeted corruption come into play? This microphone, the market price is 100 shillings.
Okay.
The procurement guys are the ones to do the market research. They do not have regulations over that because they go to the market. They'll do their market research and say, this microphone is supposed to be 1,000 bob. Because, and you see the government, just the parastatals and the sagas only give the regulations of what you need to buy. The specifications, if it is a computer, they need to tell you that you need to, as a saga, you need to buy a computer that is this space and these are the specs, but they don't tell you this is how much you need to spend, because they expect you as a procurement officer
to know,
to actually go and do a market research on the price. So that is how we normally end up in overpriced tenders, overpriced goods that are being procured at the expense of the mwananchi. So even if this microphone was costing 100 bob and I'm selling, they are procuring it 1,000 shillings, and then there are interests as well. So it has to, we have to pay 1,500 because someone has to get 500, and maybe and you see the problem of supplying to the government is that it might take time before you're paid, because most of the time they'll say we don't have money. So the supplier will say, because of the inflation, let me put this at 1,500 to cover that cost. That is the problem we have in this country, and it applies to even the bigger project. So if it is on a small thing that and it costs 500 bob more, what about on a road that costs 800 million?
Yeah.
That will actually cost 100 point something billion shillings. It will go into that to that extent. And the reason why we cannot cap this, and I always say, I think the budget making process has 4 sections in terms of formulation, approval, implementation, and then we have the audit. The audit report comes 6 months later, after the implementation of the budget. 6 months later. 6 months in this country, we can have how many CSs in the same ministry?
It's happened.
I even have a new deputy president.
Exactly. 6 months is a very long time to actually come and tell you, you actually spend this money. Maybe you went home, they took you home. So we do actually, you see, some of these things, the Auditor General gives reports and was asking about the queries that every year we're having queries and they are not acted upon. Who answers to them? If you have been sent home or you have been transferred to another ministry, you will say now the PS in that ministry needs to respond to those queries. And this is the problem we have, because we need to have this audit process very frequent.
So, I'm sorry, but I really want to understand it from an economic point of view, because that's around the conversation that we are having. That it doesn't make sense that in the private sector, for example, when you are doing this kind of thing, you have a budget for a year or whatever your cycle is, you have a budget, and maybe every quarter they're asking you to say, that's why you have auditors, that's how they make that, that's how they make their living. You have an auditor comes in and says, look at this cycle, we said we're going to spend this money, this is where we got it from, whether it's donor funded, whether it's capital funded like through banks or whatever. Walk us through this process and tell us, did we spend the money the way we said we're going to spend it? And even where we spent it, did we do it authentically? They do the forensics of all of that to make sure. In the private sector, we'll be held to that.
Yeah.
For some reason, whereby you have millions of people under your watch, and there's certain things that you're supposed to do, you know what happens? You have a chief accountability officer whose job it is to report and recommend, and that's where the power stops. And he or she will say, we've seen that there was poor absorption at the counties. We've seen that there were no development, that the development agenda was not met at the counties or in constituencies. We see that 850 billion, whatever the case may be, was said it was going to be used for this, but it was not.
Yeah.
It blows my mind that such reports can come out, and then she will pass it back to Parliament and say, over to you, sir. But over to you, sir, never happens.
Yes.
Yeah, that is the issue. And we have COB reports that always come every quarter. And most of the time, who's supposed to act on these reports? Most of the time we'll find the reports are just there for as a constitutional mandate. They do not they are not being acted upon, even when they flag out some serious violations. And coming to back to your question on why Kenyans needs to speak and how youths can get involved. We are in a situation where we cannot even speak about finance bill. Every time someone tries to speak about it, it's like we are doing, it's illegal to do that, while it is actually our right. And this, just looking at how the lady was arrested, the Ross, referring to Rose, how she was arrested because she had come up with a website that will allow Kenyans to directly engage and submit their views. And she was arrested, and I mean, she went through a lot in terms of just because she has created that website. This brings us to the question: is the government really deliberate on getting the people's views? And this must also help us awaken the fact that why do Kenyans want to give their views directly? Because we have representatives who are actually supposed to do that. But Kenyans feel their representatives are not doing enough. We need to give our own views ourselves because we don't think the people we sent are doing what we wanted. That is why we feel even if the website was jammed or the email for the parliament was jammed because there were so many emails going into it, it is not the Kenyans' problem that the email cannot accommodate many emails. It is being spammed. What can happen? What the government will have done is create another infrastructure. Look at it. How can we, if 50 million Kenyans decided they want to do an email to us, can we be able to actually receive those emails and respond to their issues? So it is not our problem that we want to talk to the issues. It is the government's problem that we want to talk about issues they don't want us to talk about. And I think that is where we have all the we have the issues around people's interests and of course the aspect of our right as citizens to engage in this process.
Yeah. Conrad, you're giving them ideas of infrastructure. Well. Yeah. Anyway, so I'd love to speak about that bit on auditing. It's actually not possible to audit books that are not closed. And that's why we have to wait for a whole year. And even in the private sector, we have to wait for 3 months for example, banks to release their audited results. And I don't think, again, just that you're not in government, you're not supposed to be followed through by what you did. For example, right now, there's that case ongoing by Okiya Omtata on Odia's debt.
Yes.
And he's accusing the former president, people that are not in government. Doesn't mean we cannot go after them if they did wrong. So regardless, whether we change CSs, whether we evict the deputy president, if you did not do something right, if you are corrupt, you should be followed. You should be able to, we should be able to retrieve the money. For example, what happened even with Waitito. Whatever the agenda was, but we saw that it's possible to actually go after an MP, a former MP or a former governor and get back our money.
Which one?
I know we didn't get back the money. What I'm saying is it's possible to actually go after someone and if
even they can be charged in court, found guilty, sentenced. But then you know what can also happen? They can go run for election and be voted back in and sit in parliament and are still sitting there today because they have not exhausted all avenues of appeal.
But that's not the problem of the government. It's the problem of the citizen. We are the ones who elect them.
This is true.
We're the ones who elect them. So on the bit of public participation, what I love to recommend is that we pick things that we understand, we pick a clause and actually tell these people we do not want this VAT added to 16 to 18% because, and it's just an example, it has not been added to 18%, and say this is the problem we have with it. We cannot be, and this is an unpopular opinion, we cannot be rejecting every document in its entirety. We have to pick clauses because under this finance bill, for example, the finance bill 2025, there's a lot of tidying up of the existing laws and regulations which come with procedures. And again, when you look at the tax procedures in Kenya, there's a lot of things that go into the accounting bit. So at the end of the day, as a company, I get to have additional costs of hiring maybe an accountant or two to be able to know this particular tax should be remitted by this date. It should be calculated this way. There's a lot of procedures in there. So the tidying up is a good thing. So when we go and say, for example, we want to reject the whole bill, then we deny ourselves even this bit on tidying up. And that's why I recommend you pick a clause. Say, for example, We do not want KRA to get into our personal data and our trade secrets. This we do not want, and we do not want because the Constitution guarantees us of our freedom of privacy. So we are telling you as the MPs, don't vote yes for this. Do not delete that clause. Go to another clause. Say, for example, asking for a refund, it will not be taking 90 days and not the 60 days that was there before. So this is a step backwards towards making our tax procedures even easier, and it makes ease of doing business more difficult. And we have made steps as a country. So let's have reasons. Let's justify, because these people, and by these people I mean for example, if I want to be specific, the Finance and Planning Committee, they have a budget. And their job is to tell us where are we getting the additional revenues. So they've seen we can increase this and increase this. They may not be feeling it because they earn more than what we earn as common wananchi. So it's for us who feel it. And I'm glad Conrad asked, why do we have MPs, but we have to give our own views? They failed us because we are not on the same level. They are here, we are here. When there's an addition to cost of living, they get allowances. And I also remember that period when I can't remember which MP said that they need to have an allowance to cater for housing levy, because there's a deduction for housing levy. Now they need more allowance so that they are not
cover for where
exactly.
And
What about us?
Even yesterday when I was watching, the CS Education actually put up his point that he needs more money, and the chair of the committee actually said that they need money to organize a conference to discuss about that issue.
Oh, you see, so so we need to point out these things. We cannot be saying at the end of the day, money is being lost. Let's go to that budget. So we are saying we can read and we can write. Yeah. Let's go to that budget and say, you buy furniture every year. Who buys furniture every year for their house? No one. So when you buy furniture, it should take you the whole of that election period, the 5 years. When we have another one, we can change the furniture, but not like we do at every fiscal year. There's a line for furniture. Doesn't make sense.
Or renovation.
Exactly.
I mean, come on. What are you doing in your house? We have to ask those questions. As well.
And the line for training every time. Yet the services we go, when we go to these public places, the services we get, and it doesn't look like you get trained. Where does the money go? So what I'm insisting on is meaningful conversations and meaningful advocacy. We point out something and say, this is the problem, this is how we feel, not blindly, so that they don't say we Gen Zs do not understand things, we are just irritable and chaotic people. We know what we are saying. When we say the cost of living is high, we know what we are saying. When we say you're mismanaging, we know you're mismanaging because you're traveling a lot and we are not traveling. Us who are giving you this money, your employers, we are not traveling the same way you're traveling. Doesn't make sense. Yes.
How would you wrap that up, Conrad?
It would be a very big injustice to just mention some of the things that have been highlighted in the finance bill that seem to be making sense. Perhaps maybe some of tax reductions, and every time I look at these tax reductions that have been highlighted in the finance bill, the question I ask myself is who benefits? When you reduce tax on aircraft spare parts.
How many people are buying? Thanks.
When you
really helped us.
When you reduce tax on steel importation, how many young people are importing steel? How many young people are importing space aircraft spare parts? Yeah. For a very long time, this country has neglected one of the biggest dividend, the youth, and they have failed to make a point in solving the biggest problem we have, unemployment. That is what the young people want to know. They do not care about the finance bill. If you are raising more money to give us more jobs, I'm pretty sure, young people can have a look at it and say, this thing, it seems like a good thing.
Yeah.
But we are not giving it a life where people can see, the young people can see, this thing is coming to give us jobs. We are not seeing it very clearly, even in the budget. what we are seeing are programs that, of course, are good, are very okay, but not everyone can go to Kazimtani. Not everyone can do that job.
Yeah.
Not everyone will go Mjengo. We need to be very, very critical in terms of the 800,000 graduates we are releasing every year. Where are they going?
Good questions. And that formed the basis for the conversation on the youth perspective that we had today, then looking critically at the Finance Bill 2025 and then what's going to come out of the budget. We want to thank you both for being here this morning. We can't stop having these conversations. Necessary and important for us to do. It's good for folks to know we know and that we actually do know.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Stella Swake is an economic analyst, and Conrad Kerr, fiscal policy analyst, have been our guests this hour. Thank you for closing out the Situation Room with us this week.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.